Welcome, beautiful people of all ages, shapes, and colors, to another bonus episode of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, where we encourage you to stick to the basics. I'm one of your co-hosts, TV, aka TV on Basketball, alongside my co-host Jay, aka the Knockdown Jay. How's it going, my guy?
It's going good, man. Playing tournament is almost wrapped up, which means the stage is almost set, bro. We are looking at a very strong set of series for the first round.
Yeah, as of recording, we're recording this on a Friday. We are giving you a bonus episode this week because we are doing a two-part NBA playoff prediction. But yeah, we have two more playing games to play tonight, but the NBA playoffs start tomorrow, and that's going to be super juicy, and we're going to be all over that. Potentially, like we mentioned in the last episode, 1 or 2 episodes a week, so be on the lookout for that. But yeah, action-packed episode. We're going to talk about the Final Four series and also do a quick preview of tonight's play-in game. So it's going to be an awesome, awesome episode. But before we start this episode, we do have to plug our socials. Remember to follow our personal socials at the Knockdown J, at TV on Basketball. All the links will be found in the description down below. In terms of the Hit Your Free Throws pod, follow us on TikTok and Instagram for the best daily NBA content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review if you're on any of the podcast networks, either on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That would be highly appreciated. And if you're on YouTube, remember to like, share, subscribe so you will not miss an episode, because these episodes are going to be coming thick and fast as the playoffs go on, so you do not want to miss out. Jay, are you ready to talk some more NBA basketball?
Yes, sir.
Let's get right into it, because just a couple of days ago, we had basically the Hit Your Free Throws Super Bowl right here, the NBA championship for the Hit Your Free Throws pod. We had the Toronto Raptors taking on the Chicago Bulls. And Jay, unfortunately, my Toronto Raptors were not able to pull out the victory. I was there in Jurassic Park. It was all good vibes for the first probably 2.5 quarters. And then Zach LaVine happened, and then everything just went and fell apart. And the Bulls won against the Raptors 109-105. Before we get into these predictions, Jay, any thoughts on that game?
I mean, first thing is, man, look, when it came to the play-in tournament, win a solid 3-1 in terms of the predictions. The Atlanta Hawks pulled off the upset in terms of my selection. So shout out to them for moving on to the next round, and being solidified in the postseason with the 7th seed. But yeah, I mean, I was confident in the Chicago Bulls. They had me sweating for the first 2.5 quarters. I'll admit that. Shout out to DeMar DeRozan's daughter. I don't know how much influence she actually had, but at the same time, look, going 50% from the free throw line with that a level of attempts, hey, man, it was one of those things that really got the Bulls back into the game. Zach LaVine really stepped out and did what he needed to do. And more importantly, I think this is the kind of stage that Zach LaVine needs to kind of step up in, because especially going into a year where we have to make a very big decision, not just on the future of Nikola Vucevic, but even DeMar DeRozan, who only has 1 more year left on his deal before we have to look at what renegotiating an extension, if we look to do that, would look like. Zach LaVine is the pillar of all that. Zach LaVine is the determining factor as to what direction we make, what direction we pivot to this summer. So seeing him play like this, it's very indicative of what could be a bright future for the Chicago Bulls. But job not finished, obviously. Job not finished at all. There's obviously still some level of sweating that takes place with that one. We'll see how things go against the Miami Heat.
Yeah, it was a good, especially like second half for the Chicago Bulls. Most importantly, Zach LaVine, 30 points in that second half, went absolutely ballistic. Was pulling up from like on fast break threes and stuff, and when those started falling, you just knew that the momentum was shifting. But back to DeMar DeRozan's daughter, real quick. Oh boy, oh boy. You know what was hilarious? During the game, like you can like because we were at Jurassic Park on the big screen, we heard the screeches, and there were a lot of people in my area who were like, "Who the heck is screaming during our free throws, man?" And this is before like the announcers or like the commentators said anything. We were going through it, and then they finally panned the camera to her, and my sister, who was at Jurassic Park with me, was like, "Isn't that DeMar DeRozan's daughter?" I'm like, "No freaking way." And apparently Navbatia, the super fan, was like, "Hey, DeMar DeRozan's family, you're my family too. Let's get you courtside." And that turned out to be the biggest mistake the Raptors have made. The super fan, man, I thought you were on our side. And this guy brought in the enemy, and she Oh boy, that was tough. 18 for 36 at the free throw line. Now look, I mean, we're all fun and jokes here. It's obviously the Raptors just sucked from the free throw line. The turnovers in the second half were absolutely horrible, but it's fun to joke around. And honestly, Scotty Barnes said it. Siakam said it. It may have. It probably wasn't the difference between them winning or losing the game, but did it affect them at the free throw line? It had to have. I mean, like if we can hear it if we can hear it like watching from the big screen from at home, you already know the people at the free throw line are hearing that. So unfortunate result. Honestly, I didn't believe that we deserved to be in this position in the first place. Congratulations to the Chicago Bulls for getting there. And yeah, it was a very fun game to watch, but just a tough result at the end of the day. But yeah, that was a super fun game. Any final thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, final thoughts is man, big series against the Miami Heat, who I actually think we are pretty geared up quality wise, talent for talent, to be able to go up against them and pull out the win. I told you when we made our predictions that I thought we were going to be going up against the Atlanta Hawks, and either way, I thought that we were going to come out with the win and make the 8th seed. Is that consolation prize of making the 8th seed really as great as it seems? Probably not, because we're just going to get slapped around by the Milwaukee Bucks again.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, I think if you're coming from a Chicago Bulls fan's perspective, there has to be some level of positivity that you pull from the way the guys have played down the stretch, especially after the acquisition of Patrick Beverley. I think it just let us know that when we have a steady point guard, Zach LaVine is able to do what he needs to do from his vantage point. And DeMar DeRozan, not necessarily it plays more passive, but understands his more secondary based role. It really opens things up. I hope that these last couple of games over the last month or so just open up things, mainly for Billy Donovan, in terms of understanding that his team needs that steady hand. But on top of that, I think it should be a really big indicator as to like how this team can function during the course of an entire 82 game season with the right competency. So I mean, win, lose, or draw in this situation, I'm looking forward to what the Chicago Bulls do now. If they're just completely stagnant again, like how they were at the trade deadline, then maybe we're in trouble. But I think just based off some of the things that we've seen, it's gonna be a fun offseason for both of our teams. I think in terms of some of the decision making ahead.
Yeah, I guess coming from a Toronto Raptors perspective, I I believe, and I think a lot of Raptor fans do believe, that it's time to kind of blow this up. There's nothing that this year has shown that kind of tells the front office that this is a team that has like potential to kind of like elevate from what they are right now. They kind of showed their ceiling last year. The teams figured them out, and now we've got probably one of our most disappointing seasons in recent memory. I expected us to be a top 6 seed this year, close to 50 wins. We were not close to that. We were completely average. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the Raptors front office do, because there are going to be a lot of moves, whether it is in the coaching positions, whether it's team personnel, the people on the roster. There's going to be a lot of changes. So for Raptor fans, be on the lookout for that. Before we move on to tonight's play-in game previews real quick, I'm going to be basically just listing off the results from the play-in games a few nights ago. We had Atlanta Hawks versus the Miami Heat. The Hawks won that one, 7 players in double figures. We had the Miami Heat led by Kyle Lowry, but it just wasn't enough. He scored 33 points. Come on, Jimmy. There were so many missed layups in that game. It was pretty nuts. Timberwolves versus Lakers. The Lakers pulled out the win to get the 7th seed. Timberwolves were winning by basically for like 3.5 quarters, and then the Lakers just took over. Anthony Davis almost sold at the end, fouling Mike Conley, but I guess it didn't really matter because Anthony Edwards just continued to brick it up in the overtime period. And then last but not least, probably honestly my most fun watch out of all these playing games, the Oklahoma City Thunder versus New Orleans Pelicans. Very good back and forth matchup, but man, that trio of Lou Dort, Josh Giddey, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander combining for 90 points in that one. That trio went absolutely nuts, and they pulled out the victory. And what a lot of people thought was a big upset, especially what the Pelicans were able to do last year in the play and in the postseason as well. So good for them. Jay, I know I listed off 3 games there, but did you have like any takeaways from those 3? Anything?
I think probably my biggest takeaway is from the Oklahoma City Thunder. Like you mentioned, definitely should be considered as an upset to a certain degree, just because of how young this team is, and just because of the pedigree that the Pelicans do have, or at least the belief that people have in the Pelicans because of what they were able to do last offseason, like you mentioned before. I think the other thing too is we have to start putting some more respect on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, not just as an individual player at the point guard position, But I think as a leader, bro, I think that's one of the biggest things that
Yeah,
goes underrated in terms of this season is that dude knows how to galvanize these guys, bro. Because when he plays top tier, I mean, this is a guy who, let's be real, Shea had a slow start to this game too. This was not a game where he came out
yeah,
swinging out the gate. He had a slow start to this game, and slowly but surely he put things together. That second half is where things started to really make sense. And Josh Giddey has just completely been empowered by
yeah.
that feedback, bro. I think a lot of people look at the skill set of Josh Giddey, especially with his lack of 3-point shooting, mainly last season, and people said, I don't know if this pairing in the backcourt works. I think it works exactly the way it's supposed
Works.
to. The biggest thing was just gonna have to be Josh unlocking that 3-point shot. And although it's kind of around league average right now, Josh being league average makes him that much more of a threat just off the fact that he's going to have the willingness to take them. And it's really opened up his game because he's already one of the better passers in the league, and we saw that on display the other night as well. So I think that Shea Gilgeous-Alexander as a leader is going completely unnoticed as one of the more underrated storylines amongst these play-in teams, but maybe across the entire league. When you talk about where he ranks amongst the best players in the NBA, we might end up doing something as an off-season episode related to that. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, I think, is going to get some heavy consideration when we talk about that top 10 to top 15, because we have to look at his age, his skill set, his translatability, and now the fact that he's not just backpacking a franchise. He is putting together building blocks for a franchise where these guys are all in sync to the point that, yeah, the talent is all there, but I think that he, in his own way, as a superstar, is the glue that's making everything work. And that's a very
Yeah.
unique situation because it's not too many times that the glue guy is also your best guy. And I think that's really interesting when you talk about where Shea fits in everything.
Yeah, I mean, you made a lot of good points there. 26 points in that second half. Very slow start to the game. I mean, Herb Jones was locking this guy up, but once he was unlocked in that third quarter, it was just crazy from there for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And what I love about this OKC team, before we do move on, is that this team kind of like takes the personality or the energy of their lead guy in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, because for such a young team to have that much poise in the fourth quarter when like with 2 minutes left, they were down like two possessions, and they were still able to bounce back. They were still able to compose themselves. Giddey made some nice plays in terms of his floater game. Shea got to the free throw line, hit some clutch free throws. The composure on such a young team, for a team that has not had any, and I mean any playoff experience besides Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Lou Dort, who was there a couple years ago with the OKC Thunder. The fact that they were able to do that and kind of just show kind of the type of composure that they had in this one, it was just super, super impressive. And whether they win or lose tonight against the Minnesota Timberwolves, I think there is a belief in this team where now that you see that Shea is not only like a bona fide top 10 talent in this league, that he is one of the better leaders leading this team in these aspects, you gotta be super, super excited about this team. And I can't wait to see what they're able to do moving forward. But yeah, those are the play-in games. We're gonna be moving on quickly to these two play-in games that we have here tonight. We have the Chicago Bulls taking on the Miami Heat, Chicago Bulls, as a matter of fact, and also we have the Oklahoma City Thunder taking on the Minnesota Timberwolves. Jay, we're gonna start over in the East. Quick thoughts. Who do you have winning tonight's game between your Bulls and the Miami Heat?
I have my Chicago Bulls, man. I think that Jimmy Butler is going to be very motivated considering that's one of his former teams, right? But I think at the same time, I don't think that Kyle Lowry can put together the kind of performance he had the other night back to back. And Kyle Lowry was a big reason why that game was even remotely competitive, right, against
Yeah,
the Atlanta Hawks. And that's probably being nice considering the way that game actually went. But
yeah,
in terms of their competitiveness, Kyle Lowry playing the way he did, showing out in that game, it's a very good sign for Miami Heat fans. But I also got to be real. Too little, too late. You've really put yourself in a tough spot, showing out at the times where, yeah, they need you the most. But I think if Kyle Lowry was even 70% of what we saw the other night for the time that he was on the floor for the Miami Heat, I think they would have been locked up as a top 6 seed, and they wouldn't even be in this situation to
mm-hmm.
begin with. I unfortunately think this is one of those seasons where the Miami Heat are going to get bit in the butt by the fact that they're getting their things together at the last second. And I don't think that that's something that's going to translate well for them. Now, the other thing that really is going to stand out again is Zach LaVine's ability to duplicate what he did beforehand. I can say that Kyle Lowry won't do what he did the other night, but Zach LaVine is a guy that we are going to need to step up. Maybe not 41 level, right? But he's going to be a guy that we're going to need to
Yeah.
really, snap and be consistent on the offensive end. it's gonna be a dogfight for sure. I know that Patrick Beverly's probably gonna end up getting the Jimmy Butler assignment. That'll be an interesting thing to probably keep an eye on. Between him and Alex Caruso, probably. I also wouldn't be surprised if Patrick Williams got some burn in that matchup as well. But I mean, at the end of the day, I feel confident in Chicago Bulls. Obviously, that's a scary thing to say on a regular basis,
Yeah.
considering we've watched this team for 82 games. But at the same time, the Miami Heat have not showed me anything that gives me the kind of confidence that said they're going to be able to come in and take out the Chicago Bulls. So it's an even standstill of a little bit of worry and a lot of confidence at the same time. I'm going to try to meet myself in the middle and kind of lead with the fandom and say that I think we're going to win, but I think it's going to be in a very close fashion, kind of like how it was against you guys.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, yeah, that's gonna be something to definitely look out for. I think it's like we mentioned this in the last game when it came to the Bulls versus the Raptors. Which duo is gonna step up more? Because DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine outperformed Siakam and Van Vliet in the last one. Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, on the other hand, played poor games against the Atlanta Hawks. And you just know against the Chicago Bulls team, they want to step up. You know Jimmy's motivation to take down one of his former teams. Not only that, Bam Adebayo was completely outplayed by Clint Capella and Onyeka Okongwu in the last matchup. You can throw in Jalen Johnson there because he was absolutely played a key role in that Hawks win. But Bam versus Nikola Vucevic, oh, that's gonna be a tough matchup for Vucevic to handle. Being facing someone who is as good on the boards as Bam Adebayo, a great defender, and of course just like infinitely times more athletic than him. I think that's going to be a big thing to see if Bam Adebayo is going to be able to bounce back from such a big game because you know he's going to be motivated to. Same thing with Jimmy Butler, especially facing his former team. Kyle Lowry, I think we probably got the best game of the postseason from Kyle Lowry in the last one. It's unfortunate that the Heat weren't able um, to kind of like meet him there because if they even got even a little bit of a better performance from Bam and Jimmy Butler, I think they would have probably came out with the win. Unfortunately, they didn't. I I gotta go with the Heat in this one just because I don't expect Bam and Jimmy Butler to have two really like stinker of a games in a row. And in terms of like duos like consistently throughout the season, yeah, DeMar and Levine probably will give you better offensive output. But when Jimmy Butler is on it on the defensive end, you know he's gonna be motivated to be on the defensive end as well. And Bam Adebayo being as effective as he is on both sides of the court, seeing how the Heat players have been able to play in postseasons in the past, I feel like they didn't have like the what's it called, the extra motivation. They didn't feel the urgency in the last game. Now it's really do or die for this team, and I think that they relish in those type of moments. I do think the Heat get the win, but it could go either way. It's literally one game. Like DeMar DeRozan and Levine can combine for 60 plus points in this one, and they could still pull out the win. Unfortunately, you're not going to have your defensive player of the year and yeah, Rhea DeRozan, but it could go either way. But I got to go with the Bulls.
You mean with the Heat?
Yeah, sorry. I'm going with the Heat. Correct. Any final thoughts before we move on to the next one?
Nah, man. Should be a fun series. Fun game. I guess.
Should be a fun game tonight. Last but not least, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder taking on the Minnesota Timberwolves. Jay, I'm going to throw it back to you. Do you think OKC has what it takes to get the 8 seed, continue this run, or do you think the Timberwolves are going to stop them in their tracks?
So I think it's funny. I'm kind of in between now because last time we recorded, I said that I felt like this is the exact thing that I thought was going to happen. I thought that the Oklahoma City Thunder had enough static to take out the New Orleans Pelicans. They were able to get that done, and I figured that they were going to end up going up against the Minnesota Timberwolves, which did end up happening because the Lakers handled their business. Granted, went all the way to overtime, and there was a lot of Karl Anthony Towns blunders and a lot of Anthony Edwards passiveness, kind of weird stuff going on with that one as well.
Yeah.
They did mention in post game that Anthony Edwards was dealing with cramping or something like that. So that's something that was notable. Minnesota gets their guys back in terms of McDaniels and Rudy Gobert.
Is McDaniels coming back? I thought he was out for the season. I think he's out.
Oh, is he?
I think he's out for the season. Like, at least he's out for. Well. Yeah, at least he's out. At least he's out for this game at least.
Well, they get Rudy Gobert back. I guess that's cool for vibes, but I'm not gonna lie, bro. Last episode, I felt like maybe Oklahoma City wasn't necessarily ready to the extent of being able to take down two teams to make the postseason. But I think you made a really great point earlier when we talked about their other game against the Pelicans. The poise they had in the fourth quarter just gives me a certain level of confidence that I didn't have in them before that game. Yeah. Of course, I felt confident in them in terms of getting the game, pulling the game in terms of getting the upset, just because of the fact that I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was easily going to be the best player in that game. And it turned out that he easily was. But also Josh Giddey and those others came for the ride. It really helped them out. But I think when you look at a game like this one, they're playing better basketball. I still think they have the better player in the game overall.
Yeah.
In that game as well. And now I have to factor in the fact that maybe talent isn't. Now I have to take into account that maybe veteranship is not as important in a single game elimination setting as I thought it was initially. So
Yeah.
I actually think I might end up leaning with the Oklahoma City Thunder in this one, contradictory to what I said in the original recording we did previewing this play-in tournament.
Yeah, I mean, if we like, even for my prediction, like in the last one, I had the Timberwolves. If it was gonna be the Pelicans or the Thunder, I thought the Timberwolves were gonna be able to pull it through with the bringing back of Rudy Gobert. But seeing that Oklahoma City Thunder game, the way that Chigos Alexander was able to rally the troops, how the other guys were able to step up, in a game where like it's probably the most like intense game that they had in their careers, and they're able to respond in the way that they did. I'm feeling a lot more confident in them too, and that's why I'm taking them to win this game as well. I just think that the Timberwolves probably got the worst of it at the end of the season with the whole Rudy Gobert thing, with the whole Jaden McDaniels punching the wall incident as well. I just think that the bad vibes just came at the worst time possible. And in a one-game scenario, I mean, in a 7-game series, I would probably lean to Timberwolves, especially just with the talent and just the veteranship that they have there with Conley and Gobert. But in a one-game scenario, when you have the momentum that the Oklahoma City Thunder have and the unmatched confidence with a leader like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I'm feeling good about them in this game, man. I'm feeling good, and I think that compared to, the New Orleans Pelicans, I don't think anyone on that Timberwolves team can handle Shai Gilgeous-Alexander the way that Herb Jones at least attempted to do in the last game as well. I think Shai goes for a big game. Josh Giddey continues to have a pretty continues his hot play as well. Jalen Williams, J-Dub had a struggle game in the last one, but I think that he's gonna get better opportunities in this one So I think I'm gonna lean OKC too. I just don't like the way that the Timberwolves ended that game last time, and I don't know. I'm just not feeling it right now. Give me the Oklahoma City Thunder to pull out that win. Any final thoughts?
No, man, it should be a good game. I'm kind of nervous about switching, considering my confidence level initially, but I just love Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as a player too much to the point. After seeing what I saw in that game against the Pelicans, I hope that they prove me right, because I feel like they are one of the most exciting teams to watch so far this season. And then making the postseason, look, this might sound crazy, and I hate to go into hot take mode, and maybe it's a little
Yeah.
bit early considering this is one of the series that we are going to be previewing, but I don't think the Nuggets are safe if Oklahoma City comes out of this.
Okay. We'll get into that. We're gonna definitely expand on that when we get to that series. But yeah, those are our predictions for the play-in tournament. Let us know down below what your thoughts were, because we're posting this the next day. So let us know your thoughts on that game and also the series that we're gonna be talking about right after this. All right. Now that we got that out the way, let us move on to part 2 of our playoff previews. We have 4 more series to do as well, to make predictions on. The 1-8 matchups, we're going to tell you how we're going to be predicting those as well later on. But we're going to start over in the Eastern Conference. We know one matchup for sure that's going to happen, which is the Boston Celtics taking on the Atlanta Hawks. Very interesting matchup. We have a Boston Celtics team who, coming into this, is a top 2 defensive and offensive team in the league, and the Atlanta Hawks probably played one of their best games of the entire season, taking down the Miami Heat. Jay, what is one thing what is like the biggest thing you're looking for in this matchup?
Can Trae Young survive? Seriously. I know that sounds kind of aggressive, especially coming off of what he was able to do, orchestrating the insane play against the Miami Heat. But I just think the Miami Heat just proved to us that they are not able to turn it on the way they've done in years past in terms of being able to bring that physicality. Now, maybe they prove us wrong in the Chicago Bulls game, and they turn it back up and they position themselves to just, walk back in as one of the scarier teams in terms of how they're able to put a body on everybody. But in terms of a series against the Boston Celtics, I mean, I would argue across the board that they have the kind of versatility that the Miami Heat dream of having, considering the talent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at it from that perspective, again, Trae Young is not necessarily the player that he was the last time he saw the Miami Heat in the playoffs, right? I think that he definitely proved in the play-in game that he at least has a little bit more to his bag than what happened where he got clamped up. But I just think that unlike that Miami Heat team, this year's Celtics team much more talented, much more versatile, and if Trey can ball out, this can be a series. But bro, it's not looking good, bro. I'm not gonna lie. I understand what they did to the Miami Heat, but like of all teams to draw, in a weird way, I think the Celtics are not the team that the Atlanta Hawks would want to see out of that top three, bro.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where the Celtics can really adjust to any sort of play style that the Hawks want to do, whether if they want to go big, if they want to go small. The Celtics have the personnel to deal with that. Now, speaking of Trae Young, he does do well against the Celtics. In his career, he's averaged 33-9 against the Celtics. For some reason, he absolutely steps up in these games versus Boston. But in terms of the team overall, it's hard to, I mean, there's a reason why the Hawks are 41-41. Their team was just super inconsistent throughout the season. I mean, it was great to see how good their bench was playing in the last game too. But compared to the Boston Celtics, who were able to show that they were a top two team offensively and defensively, in terms of efficiency, it's going to be an absolutely tough series. And one thing I do want to mention too is over the last 15 years, um, there have only been two different teams that were top two defense and offense in terms of efficiency. And that was the two, and that was the 14-15 Golden State Warriors who went on to win a championship, and it was also the 16-17 Warriors who went on to win a championship. So this Boston Celtics team is in rare company in terms of how good they've been playing in the regular season. They just have a more dominant duo of Tatum and Brown that can give them 60 points a night. Their supporting cast in terms of Smart, Derek White, they're not afraid to get down and dirty with the Atlanta Hawks backcourt. Then you have just a great mix in the front court with Al Horford, Robert Williams. You can throw in Grant Williams into the mix. They have a nice deep bench with potential sixth man of the year and Malcolm Brogdon as well. Just the Celtics as a whole, just like they look a lot better on paper. They they play a lot better as a team. Now, if there's an opening for the Atlanta Hawks, I would say that the Celtics live and die by the three. If they shoot themselves out the game, I think that's a time where the Hawks can take over. But those are few and far between. The Celtics are one of the better. They made some of I think were near the top of the league in terms of 3-pointers made. But it doesn't look great for this Boston Celtics for this Atlanta Hawks team for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point that you just articulated is the one that I think actually is going to be the most important. The fact that the Boston Celtics have been like dominating teams with their 3-point shooting ability across the board. Al Horford, Grant Williams, Jason Tatum to a certain extent, Jaylen Brown to a certain extent, Malcolm Brogdon shot the ball relatively decent. Sam Hauser and guys like that have even chipped
Yeah.
in terms of just being able to like just stroke it from back there and be a threat. That puts them in a really big position because the Atlanta Hawks have transitioned away from that, right? When they
Yeah.
moved on from guys like Kevin Herter, and they moved on from a handful of the guys that they had on the roster a season and 2 seasons ago, it kind of transitioned their play to being more mid-range heavy. That's kind of due to DeJounte Murray's presence more than
Yes.
anything. But that mid-range threat is something that I think is big time in a playoff series when the game slows down. But I think at the end of the day, if the Celtics are going to play their brand of basketball, if their 3-point shooting is as effective as it's been all season long, that mid-range shooting can be a weapon for the Atlanta Hawks. But TV, I'm no mathematician, but 3 is still more than 2. So it's one of those
Yeah.
things that definitely kind of slides things in the Celtics' favor. Like I said, Trae Young is the game breaker. I think the stats you read on him in terms of what his statistics against the Celtics are is a notable thing to give us some hope that he's going to be able to ball out in a series against them. And he desperately needs it, right? Because
Yeah.
TV, we didn't really talk about this on the podcast very much, but it's something that should be noted. Like Trae Young had an all-star caliber season this year, and most people are referring to him like on scrub level, like all season
Yeah.
long, which feels crazy, right? Considering the fact
Yeah.
this is a guy that's an all NBA caliber guard, and he had a big time year, but it just doesn't stand out between the team's lack of success, obviously the early season drama that kind of led to some swirling thoughts about him potentially requesting a trade, and then obviously the coach killer stuff and bunch of things that other things that are not on the court related, but definitely end up formulating a specific kind of narrative about who Trae Young is as a player, right? So it puts him in a really weird position. But I think that it still should be noted that despite the fact that we don't view Trae Young the way we did in seasons past, just because of a lot of outside noise, this is a guy that is still very capable of having a breakout series. I can't even say breakout series because obviously they had that season that run 2 seasons ago.
Yeah.
But he has the ability to have a redemption series coming off the Miami Heat series from last year, and I know that he's motivated by that alone because I think he had a post game interview that was in relation to like where they feel like they are coming off of that play-in victory, and he was like the goal is to get wins in the actual playoffs, and of course coming off of that series with the Miami Heat where it was not pretty, right?
Yeah.
I think that's definitely one of those things at the top of his head in terms of where he's moving. So I think Atlanta is going to give them. Atlanta is going to have a puncher's chance. I just think that the Celtics are just built built in a way that I think is gonna make a team like Atlanta struggle.
Yeah, no, for sure. Especially like, and one more thing before we move on to our predictions, it's how much is someone like Clint Capella is going to play because he played a massive, massive role in that Miami Heat win, especially on the rebounding end. But in a series where, like we mentioned, the 3-point shooting is going to be absolutely key to defend if you're the Atlanta Hawks. How is Clint Capella going to be able to like run the pick? Like, how is he going to be able to defend the pick and roll when he's in drop coverage all the time? He's going to be leaving a lot of 3-point shooters wide open, especially in terms of rotations and stuff. How is he going to be able to stay on the floor? And even if the Hawks go small, the Celtics have the personnel to match that as well. So it's going to be a very, very difficult series. Another thing to look out for: the Hawks actually have the highest scoring bench since the trade deadline. So if they're able to outscore the Boston bench in a lot of the games, that gives them a chance as well. But I just still find it very, very tough for them to be able to pull out this win. Jay, your final prediction: who do you have winning it and how many games?
Celtics in 6. I'm giving the Atlanta Hawks 2 games because I feel like Trae Young understands where he's going to be at. I would not be surprised if the Celtics win in a way where they come out of a few of those games just kind of escaping.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the Atlanta Hawks are going to give them a run for their money. But I think at the end of the day, the Celtics are just going to be too good. And I think this is also going to be one of those series where they're going to want to try to get them out early, which is why 6 is actually maybe pushing it. I just believe a little bit more in the Atlanta Hawks than maybe most people. But
Yeah.
I think that the Celtics agenda, especially with the way that the bracket is set up, which is kind of favorable for them actually, if you think about it, they should want to make light work of the Atlanta Hawks if possible. Whether or not Trae Young allows that is going to be very interesting to see. By the way, TV complete game breaker that we didn't bring up. X Factor easily for this series. Quinn Snyder stepping in as the head coach, right?
Yeah.
Having that kind of playoff experience and now being in a position to be able to have a guy like Trae Young. Quinn Snyder has had some interesting series as a coach for the
Yes. Yes,
Utah
he
Jazz,
has.
right? But he has a certain situation now with Trae Young and these guys where they are all motivated for external reasons that I think could be a very big factor in how this series goes. Obviously, it doesn't always translate to the on the floor stuff, but Quinn Snyder has a real good chance to be able to prove that some of those meltdowns with the Utah Jazz have more to do with things like the pandemic, team dynamic, and things of that nature, as opposed to just him being outclassed. I think Quinn Snyder is a really solid coach. He's gonna have his work cut out for him because Joe Mazzulla's he might be new to the game, but he's no slouch either. And of course, the
Yeah.
talent he's got in his back pocket. Talk about Joe Mazzulla and those Celtics. It's gonna be an uphill battle. Quinn is gonna have to coach his tail off in order for them to be competitive in the series beyond just Trae Young playing out of his mind.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Quinn Snyder, revered as one of the better, probably on the better half of coaches in the league, especially with his time he had with the Utah Jazz. Is him coming in this late into the season going to affect how the team's going to play? I mean, they have played good underneath him, but at the same time, they're going up against a Celtics team who just look as cohesive as ever. It's going to be a really, really tough series for them. I don't want to live in the moment because the Atlanta Hawks did play extremely well versus the Miami Heat, and I do want to acknowledge that. But we haven't seen the Celtics in probably like almost a week. But we have to remember how good they have been this entire season long. You're going with the Celtics in 6. I'm actually going to be going with Celtics in 5. I think that their entire lineup as a whole and just like their top talent in terms of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum is just going to just overwhelm the Hawks too much, no matter how good Trae Young plays. I mean, he'll probably like finish the series honestly 30-10. I truly do believe that. That type of like you're gonna get that type of series from Trae Young, even against someone like a Marcus Smart, former Defensive Player of the Year. I think that's gonna be a massive series for Trae Young. But there's only so much he could do. I don't know if DeJounte Murray can even keep up with a Jaylen Brown type of offensive production, which he has shown that to be one of the like elite scorers in this league as well. Him and Tatum together, mixed in with the sixth man of the year, they've shown why they were a very good offense this year. And then when it comes playoff time, they're gonna just they're gonna turn it up on the defensive end as well. The Hawks, they do have a puncher's chance. I do believe that, but I just don't want to like take away from how good the Celtics have been this year. Let me go Celtics in 5. Jay, any final thoughts on the series?
Hey man, this might be a series where I'm not gonna lie, dude. Might be a trap series, low key. Might be a trap series. Maybe I'm living in the moment by looking at what the Atlanta Hawks were able to do. Again, the Miami Heat are a really physical team. I don't think the Boston Celtics are nearly as physical, but I think they're just as switchable. And that's what I think might be a big difference in terms of how they respond. Again, also, it's a 7-game series as opposed to a 1-game outing. So I think with the ability to game plan against these guys, that the Celtics are there. But I've said this beforehand. The Celtics are the type of team that kind of plays down to their competition, and they're one of those teams that oddly likes to play with their food. And they showed their hand in the back half of the season because after being the most dominant team, not just in the Eastern Conference, but in the entire NBA for the first half of the year, they really showed their hands in the second half. I hope that they understand that this is a big setting for them, and the truth is, despite the fact that the Milwaukee Bucks are seen as the favorites to come out of the Eastern Conference, the Celtics are the team that should technically run the table because their portion of the bracket is more favorable. They have to see the result of the Milwaukee versus Philadelphia 76ers series if that's what we get. So they only have to face one of the two. That's something that should really play into their favor. They have to take advantage of it. The Celtics should be much more favored than I think we're giving credit, but they have to handle the Hawks first.
They do have to, for sure. Moving on to the next series in the Eastern Conference. Now, this one, of course, is going to be a little bit difficult to kind of explain, but the Bucks are either going to be facing off against the Miami Heat or the Chicago Bulls in the series. Jay, I'm gonna have you have your thoughts on kind of both of like whether it really matters which team it comes out of the East, or if the Milwaukee Bucks are just going to destroy both of them. But we're gonna ultimately give our predictions whether they face the Heat or the Bulls. But Jay, back to that original question, like, does it even matter that the whoever comes out of this 8-seed game are the Bucks just gonna absolutely dominate?
I think that when you look at the way it's set up, it's definitely one of those things where the Milwaukee Bucks have a favorite in terms of who they would rather see. Now, unfortunately, that's my Chicago Bulls. I just have to be honest. Their team is just geared better towards what we do and what we don't do well. So I think that the Milwaukee Bucks definitely are licking their chops if they see the Chicago Bulls come out of this one. Unfortunately, that's just the case because we just don't have anybody that can deal with their physicality. I keep talking about that word because if you look at the Eastern Conference, that is the key. Like that is the key to the Eastern Conference. Physicality is shown throughout the entirety of any series that you look at in terms of which team is going to be able to respond. Physicality and switchability are like big factors in the Eastern Conference because there's a ton of size out east. The Bulls don't have a ton of size. If you haven't noticed, DeMar DeRozan's been playing the 4. So
Alex Caruso played the 4.
You know what I mean? If that doesn't tell you that we're a small ball team, I don't know what does. And I don't think responding to Giannis Antetokounmpo and Brook Lopez in the front court is a solid way to try to actually combat and win a series. So they're definitely looking for us. That's the unfortunate thing. I also think that the Miami Heat, I think the Bucks feel much more comfortable against the Miami Heat than maybe in years past, especially because they've had fits with Miami beforehand. I think that's the one part that maybe makes the series between those two more interesting because I think Bam versus Giannis, obviously big time over there in terms of one-on-one matchup. Jimmy Butler still, I think in terms of backcourt play, I think he probably is the best player in the series. Because obviously I think we take him over Drew Holiday, and I think with Chris Middleton being in the state that he's in, I think Jimmy Butler you probably still would take over Chris Middleton anyway. But I think especially in the state where Chris Middleton is still in a limbo between back to his original self and still kind of trying to work out the kinks, Jimmy Butler is definitely one of the better players in the series in terms of the backcourt. So I think it's one of those things where the Milwaukee Bucks still come out of the first round. I don't even want to say handsomely, but I will say that I think there's a difference between if they face the Bulls and if they face the Miami Heat. So the Bucks know who they're rooting for today.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we've seen this story with the Bulls before. Last year, the Bulls did take a game. I do want to give them credit for that. But at the end of the day, the Bucks just absolutely waxed them last year. They just, when you look at just the front court mismatch, when you have whoever you have at the power forward position, even if we just slot in someone like Patrick Williams, right? We just slot him into that power forward position. Does that really matter when you have going up against Giannis, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis? No, it doesn't really matter. Vucevic is gonna have a super tough time in that series, like he did in the last series as well. They're definitely hoping for the Bulls to win. I do think that um, DeMar and Zach LaVine, like especially if Zach LaVine can like continue his like solid play um from the All-Star break onwards, there is a chance they can get another game. But at the end of the day, the Bucks have been playing so well. Giannis playing at an MVP level. Drew probably having his best season as a Milwaukee Buck in general. Defensive Player of the Year possibly, in Brook Lopez as well. That's gonna just be a super tough matchup for them. I just don't think they match up well at all. In terms of Miami Heat, it's a little bit better, but at the same time, Bam Adebayo. I mean, there's no PJ Tucker like they had last year. They don't have that. They don't have that luxury of having to have like a one specific guy to guard Giannis. It's Bam's turn, and that means that's less front court depth. Still having to deal with Giannis, Brook, and Bobby Portis. It just sounds too much trouble for the Miami Heat. Their role players have not been as consistent as they were last year, so that's going to be super key to watch. And the Bucks have Chris Milton now. Last year, the reason why they lost was because Chris Milton was in the lineup, and the Heat were able to take advantage of that. He's back in the lineup. The Heat are worse. Playoff Jimmy can give them a fighter's chance if playoff Jimmy just show up, because like I mentioned in the past, when the playoffs come around, even though he did not play well in the first playing game, when it really comes down to it, Jimmy Butler can like absolutely go off in the playoffs. He could play at an MVP level. We've seen the Heat show up in the playoffs in years past. It's just this year there's just like no proof, no reason to suspect that they're going to be able to do it this year. Now without PJ Tucker, their defense is going to be absolutely worse against a Bucks team where we know what they're about. We know what they could do defensively. We know what Giannis could dominate on the offensive end. It's just not going to be a good time for the Heat, or as a matter of fact for the Bulls either. I just don't think it's going to be that much of a difference whether either of them come out of this game. But Jay, give me your predictions for both the Bulls series and the Heat series. How many games do you have each series going?
I'm honestly not gonna waver on this one. I think that Milwaukee is just better overall. I think no matter which team they take, I think they're gonna take them in 5 games. I think regardless of which team it is. I think maybe the series is much more competitive if it's the Miami Heat. But I think at the end of the day, the Milwaukee Bucks are gonna want to be able to assert their dominance. Their dominance. I think they understand that they're the prohibitive favorites. They're definitely a team that takes that, and or I would say doesn't take that lightly. And I think in both series, regardless of which matchup they get, they kind of have a decent understanding of the team in front of them. Because the Miami Heat Milwaukee Bucks thing has kind of become a thing over the last 3 or 4 seasons, right? And then in terms of the Chicago Bulls, like you mentioned earlier, I mean, they clearly had our number last season, and I would argue that we're not nearly the team we were last year, especially in terms of closing games. So, I mean, like you said beforehand, maybe we're able to sneak another game off them just because Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan are that talented, but I think it goes 5 regardless of who they see.
Yeah, I'm gonna be with you. I'm gonna be with you here. I don't think it's gonna be a long series no matter who they face. In terms of the Miami Heat, I do think it's gonna go 5 games. We talked about this with Oklahoma City Thunder. The team takes on the personality of their leader, and Giannis takes no days off. When it comes, especially in terms of playoff basketball, you already know he's going to give it 110%. And now with a healthy roster around him, I just think it's just going to be too overwhelming for the Miami Heat, especially with the disappointing season that you can look up and down the roster with these guys. I mean, Jimmy Butler had a good year, Bam had a good year, but besides that, everyone else has kind of had a subpar year for their standards. So I don't think they're going to be able to still turn it on in the playoffs, especially in the playoff series. So I think that's going to be extremely tough for them. And as for the Chicago Bulls, I think it's going to be a sweep. There's going to be one sweep. It's probably going to be that matchup. I can't think of a series where like matchups just completely go against one of these teams, and I think it's the Chicago Bulls in terms of like if they do face the Milwaukee Bucks. There's no favorable matchup there, which is highly unfortunate. It's just like everything that the Bucks do well, like they can take away what the Chicago Bulls do well. Yes, they're a good defensive team as well, but they just clearly just don't have the size to deal with such a big team like the Milwaukee Bucks. So I do believe that's going to be a sweep. Jay, any final thoughts?
Milwaukee's a tough out, bro.
Fair.
As we get throughout, as we continue through the rounds, we'll have a little bit more and improved analysis in terms of the Milwaukee Bucks. But this is honestly, this first round is just, I don't want to say it's barbecue chicken for them, but this is definitely, this first round is favorable for them. I think obviously when you get into a series where maybe they end up facing the Philadelphia 76ers, then we're having a real conversation about individual matchups and things like that. But if you just look at them against them, like you mentioned before, and if you just look at them against the Chicago Bulls, they're favorable across the board. I think even with Drew Holiday against the guy, I mean, Drew Holiday against a guy like Zach LaVine, I think Zach LaVine can give him buckets, but I think Drew Holiday can also respond in his own way. If not offensively, I think defensively he's going to be able to keep things competitive. And across the board, outside of that, I think that Milwaukee's better, and then I think the same thing goes for the Heat. As long as the Heat's depth continues to be a big functional problem, or I guess dysfunctional problem for them,
Yeah.
they don't match up well with what Milwaukee is able to do defensively. And TV, I've been saying it like since the beginning of the podcast when we talk beginning of us starting the podcast, more specifically following the trade deadline. The Milwaukee Bucks are probably the team that when you look in both conferences, they're going to trot out one of the best, if not the best, five-man defensive lineup in the entire postseason.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And I mean, like, you don't want to say it, but I'll say it. It's barbecue chicken for either of these teams. I'll say that. I want to give these teams credit, but at the same time, you got to kind of acknowledge greatness at this point. The Milwaukee Bucks are just that great of a team. Those are our Eastern Conference playoff predictions. Let us know down below what you guys think. Let us move over to the Western Conference, and we're going to start off with the series that we know that's going to happen. Firstly, we're going to be looking at the Memphis Grizzlies taking on the Los Angeles Lakers, the 2-7 matchup. And I don't know about you, Jay, but this is a pretty interesting series. We talked about in the past that Steven Adams is a big key to this Memphis Grizzlies team, and he's probably going to be out for the playoffs. There's going to be no Brandon Clark, and the Lakers are turning it on at the right time. It's going to be really interesting to see where both of us go with this. But, Jay, what is the biggest thing you're going to be looking for in terms of the series?
I'm so sick of these Lakers, man. I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick of it, bro. Series after series, I look at them and just keep asking myself, like, dang, like, where do they really stack up? And once you start looking at the bracket, bro, it's just like it feels jerry-rigged, bro. It feels completely finessed. Like, it's like one of those things where I'm not saying that they're going to make the finals, but what I'm saying is that if there was a pathway they needed to give themselves a legitimate chance to be in this for a long run, it's this one. Memphis is a team that I think is very cocky going into this thing. You already got Dylan Brooks saying, "Oh man, I don't mind getting the Lakers. I want to be the team that gets them out in the first round," and da 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 da. I think that kind of arrogance is the kind of stuff that gets you caught up, and I think that LeBron James specifically is going to give Dylan Brooks buckets. I know Dylan Brooks can give most folks fits, but I think LeBron James. I hate to kind of do the Jordan quote thing, but I think he's going to take this jump personally, bro. I really do.
Yeah.
And then I think front court wise, Anthony Davis versus Jaren Jackson Jr. is one of those things that's going to be interesting because look. Once Anthony Davis got Karl Anthony Towns in foul trouble, things got jiggy quick, right or wrong. So then you look at that in terms of a foul-prone player like Jaren Jackson Jr., who's going to try to be physical and aggressive with Anthony Davis in order to keep things afloat. That's tough, bro. And the Steven Adams element, that's tough, bro, because you don't really got the bodies to throw at Anthony Davis. So the biggest matchup in the series, I think, believe it or not, despite the fact that John Moran is the best player on Memphis, if Jaren Jackson Jr. cannot hold his own and keep himself together, this series is going to get nasty. And I'm telling you right now, the Lakers are playing with a certain level of momentum right now because you got the nerve to let Dennis Schroeder start catching fire. This is one of them things where now all of a sudden the Lakers are kind of playing with house money. This is a team that's been underwhelming all season, and now they're just playing with house money. And that's kind of crazy for a team that you feel like should have championship aspirations, considering the two top guys on their roster. But at the same time, this is a team that rose up from the dead, man. So the fact that they're even in this in the first place, crazy enough as it is. Now they get a matchup where I think they actually have a fair amount of advantages. Oh man, Memphis, I'm so sorry.
I I don't know, man. I think that people are really underrating the Grizzlies right now. I think, like, yeah, the Lakers are playing great, but I mean, I won't even say they're playing great. Did you see them play in the last game? I think, if anything, the last game should show that, yeah, they have the name talent in terms of LeBron and Anthony Davis, but the rest of the team, like D'Angelo Russell kind of going like super cold in that game. The fact that Jared Vanderbilt is like if he's like not doing well defensively, like he's giving you basically nothing on the offensive end. Yes, Shorter played a great game, but is that going to be consistent? I don't know. I think people are really underrating the Grizzlies in this series, especially with the fact that, let's be honest, this Memphis Grizzlies team, compared to the Lakers, who made lots of in-season adjustments in terms of their roster, this Memphis team has been together for what 3-4 years at this point. These guys have the cohesiveness, they have the chemistry. Not only that, Taylor Jenkins was with them throughout this entire ride. This is a team that knows how to play with each other. And yes, there's no Steven Adams. Yes, there's no Brennan Clark, who have been staples of the rotations over the past couple of years. But we've seen in years past, we've seen in the regular season that with this Memphis Grizzlies team, it's next man up. Even though Xavier Tillman might be a reserve center, he's had his moments, whether it's in postseasons past. I mean, this is just a next man up mentality. And I think another thing that people are not really looking at is like underrating John Morant for some reason. I think that John Morant could possibly, I mean, he may not be looking like the best player in the series right now, but he could be the best guy in this series if the Memphis Grizzlies were able to go out and win this. He could possibly be the best guy out on the court. That's how good John Morant is. And just looking at the supporting cast, I just trust the Grizzlies more. We don't know what we're going to get on a night-to-night basis from a Hachimura, from, again, like I said, Vanderbilt, D'Angelo Russell, Dennis Schroeder. We know what we're going to get from Desmond Bane on a nightly basis. We know the effort that we know that Tyus Jones is one of the elite backup point guards in the league. He is the model of consistency over there. And the Grizzlies in general, very consistent. I do want to point that out too about the Jaren Jackson staying out of foul trouble, because that is my biggest point here. I have it completely bolded. Triple J, just please stay out of foul trouble, because if he's in foul trouble and you're just left with Xavier Tillman, it's going to be tough. And I think that's something that the Lakers are going to be honing in on, especially with players like LeBron and Anthony Davis, who just live inside the paint. They're going to see Jaren Jackson Jr. and going to be like, this guy only plays 27 minutes a game. Why is that? Oh yeah, he fouls out a lot. He's always in foul trouble. The one thing to see here, and I think it's going to be what's going to really like be a difference factor in the series, is if Jaren Jackson Jr. can play 31, 32 minutes a game, because that will be absolutely fantastic for the Memphis Grizzlies. Because not only is he like probably the league leader in terms of defensive player of the year, when John Morant was out, we could see his offensive ability. He averaged, I think, like 22, 23 points a game in John Morant's absence. He had multiple 30-point games in John Morant's absence. He has offensive ability as well. I am still confident in the other guys on the Grizzlies they have on their team. With players such as, even though Dylan Brooks is not a great shooter, he will still provide on the offensive end. You still have players like Luke Kennard, who's a solid shooter, and just a lot of good role players on that team. And compared to the Lakers, where it's just, even still at this point, even though they're playing, they're probably the best basketball of the season, I'm still not confident, especially from what I saw in that game versus the Timberwolves. I think that people really underrating the Grizzlies right now. But Jay, who you got in the series? It sounds like you're leading one way. This might be a series where we disagree, but who do you think who's going to take this one?
Dude, I'm going to regret this so bad. I'm already knowing. But we're going to do it anyway, because everything is just pointing in the direction that I feel like this is going to go buck wild. I'm going to take the Lakers in 7 games.
No. Oh, no.
And I don't like this, but I have spent episode after episode after episode trying to build the obituary for this team. And it seems like every time that I talk bad on them, something happens. TV, if you remember, we had an episode where you specifically kind of spoke me back onto the potential Lakers gravy train in terms of them being able to turn their season around after making the initial trades that they had after the trade deadline. And, bro, this team, it has not been pretty by any means, but this team is just oddly putting it together in a way where they're playing competent basketball. Bro, I feel like this Memphis Grizzlies team has gone through a lot this season. They have put themselves in a very interesting situation, despite the fact that they've been able to survive the things that have gone on throughout the year. That Steven Adams thing is big, bro. Like, I mean, we're talking about we're talking about a guy who arguably was having like the greatest offensive rebounding season of all time before he
Yeah.
went down, right? And the Jaren Jackson Jr. thing, it scares me, bro. It's one of those things that it's not just, oh, can Anthony Davis go crazy on him? It's like LeBron James can hunt him out. Dennis Schroeder can hunt him out. Austin Reeves is getting to the cup a lot more frequently nowadays. This is a guy who I think if you're a veteran-based basketball team like the Lakers, your strategy is to seek out Jaren Jackson Jr. as an eager shot blocker, and I think that that's something they can confidently do.
Yeah.
I
It's
don't love it, bro. I will honestly admit that I do not love that I'm picking the Lakers right now. But the Lakers, at least for this series, this is one of them things where they are lined up in a pretty good way. Now let's remind ourselves that we also felt this way about them in a series against the Phoenix Suns once upon a time, and they got them up out of there too in terms of the Phoenix Suns handling their business. But I think the Phoenix Suns once at that time were also just a better team than we were giving them credit. And maybe the same thing is the case for the Memphis Grizzlies. Maybe it is, but I don't think that this Memphis team has the same circumstances as that Phoenix team too, because Memphis is missing a big hole in their offense, and they have a way bigger question in the middle than the Phoenix Suns do or did.
Yeah, yeah. Jay, I didn't want to see you do this, but you've completely turned around on the Lakers, my guy. You've completely turned around. Uh, this is a tough series. This is definitely a tough series to predict. I am gonna go and not go with like I'm not completely bought into this Lakers team. I think that one little thing that could happen to Anthony Davis or LeBron James, and literally like anything could happen to these guys at any point, could completely derail them this series because like I mentioned like earlier, I just don't trust the other guys on that team, especially like on a night-to-night basis on the offensive end. Give me the Grizzlies in six. Give me the Grizzlies in six. I just think people see, oh, they have the second best record in the West since the All-Star break. Oh, they're finally putting things together. Is it really being put together, or is it just because LeBron and Anthony Davis are backpacking? I don't know how much that can really like move forward. Do think free throws is going to be a big thing. Like seeing the free throw discrepancy is going to be absolutely massive in this series. But man, I'm still a huge believer in this Memphis Grizzlies team. I think that John Morant has been battle tested in terms of this play, like in terms of the playoffs these past like couple of seasons. Jaren Jackson Jr. I I mean, as much as we say that the Lakers are going to hunt it out, I think the Memphis Grizzlies are like in the locker room, literally surrounding like Jaren Jackson Jr. while he's sitting like in the middle in a chair, saying, "Jay, please, please just try and stay in the game for us," because like he is probably like their second most important player on that team. And at the end of the day, I think that he is still. I think like he will. I think he like there's gonna be emphasis on his discipline. I think he's gonna be really focusing on that to try and stay on the floor for the Grizzlies. Alongside that, I just trust the surrounding guys of the Grizzlies a little bit more than the Lakers. Oh, sorry, a lot more than the Lakers. So yeah, the Lakers have name value. I do get that. But there's a reason why they were in this position in the first place. Yes, they've been turning it up recently, but there's a reason why it was just such a struggle for them to get here in the first to get to 7 seed in the first place. The Grizzlies, even through all this, this what people might say is just like a disaster in terms of like off court, in terms of PR stuff, and with the injuries as well. They've still been able to maintain themselves. They've still been able to maintain their second spot in the West. I think that says a lot about the character of the team, the leadership of the coach, and I think I just trust that more in this series. Give me the Grizzlies in 6.
Something that you mentioned was the coaching. That's something that I will also give a lot of credence to. I think Darvin Ham has actually quietly coached his ass off this entire season, despite the fact that they've had so many ups and downs. Taylor Jenkins with the platoon mentality, is he going to stick with it by trying to do that in a series where they not technically, where they resoundingly have the depth
Yeah.
advantage, right? I think that's an interesting tactic that we need to keep an eye out on. Is Taylor Jenkins is not afraid to go 9, 10 deep still, even in the postseason. If he's still willing to do that, that could be a sneaky way that either helps the Lakers or goes against the Lakers in terms of their lack of depth. Because, hey, that could be 40 minutes straight. That could be 40 minutes where in certain situations, LeBron James and Anthony Davis on the floor against second units for the Memphis Grizzlies, thinking they're getting a little cute with the whole using the second unit thing. Or it could be one of those things where the bench depth completely kills them, and that ends up being a game-breaking factor in the series.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, it's gonna be because like it's really interesting because like for most teams when it comes to the playoffs, shorten the rotation to 8, maximum 9 guys is a thing. With this Grizzlies team, depth is their strength, so it's going to be extremely interesting to see, like you mentioned, if Taylor Jenkins is going to stick to that. But at the end of the day, I mean, these guys just know how to play with each other. Whatever lineups on the court, I just feel like that it just gives them an advantage over the Lakers. Very similar to how the Phoenix Suns were able to take them down a couple years back. One more series we have to go through in the Western Conference, and once again, it's the 1-8 series, the Denver Nuggets versus either the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Again, both are feeling very differently right now. One team is on an absolute high after winning their first play-in game, looking really good compared to the Timberwolves, where this end of the season has been an absolute disaster class. But Jay, against either one of these opponents, do you think that the Nuggets still have a clear advantage?
Because of Jokic, yes.
I like that.
In terms of everything else, I fear for this team.
Interesting. Okay.
TV, I think I've spoken on this on the podcast beforehand, but Denver doesn't scare me. I've had a weird thought about this over the last couple of weeks in terms of the way they've been playing recently. Obviously, a team that maybe is just kind of sleepwalking through the last portion of the season, considering they had the first seed locked up.
Yeah.
But they're a team that really kind of concerns me because of the fact that I don't think that they can survive in minutes where Jokic isn't on the floor. And although Jokic is one of the more durable players in the league, in a 7-game series, they're a team that has to be very careful about how much they rely on Nikola Jokic. And I mean this more specifically in what I mentioned earlier against a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder. If we know anything about the Denver Nuggets, one thing that we can take away more recently from the Golden State Warriors series from a season ago is they don't respond well to up-tempo teams. They don't respond well. Jokic is not the get back type. He's not the get back type. He's not the in the paint rim defending center that's going to be a deterrent in the paint. And this is a team that does not respond relatively well to teams that can get out and run and create high counts of possessions. They are not a team that thrives in those situations. So it's going to be interesting to see, specifically if Oklahoma City ends up making it, how Denver responds to that. Because, like I said, these up-tempo teams kind of tend to have their number. And I don't think that the Oklahoma City Thunder are designed in a similar way as that Golden State Warrior team, excuse me. But I do think that they have a couple of things that do play in their favor in a way that could duplicate the success of the Golden State Warriors from a season ago, if that makes any sense.
In terms of the Denver Nuggets, I truly do not think that any team goes in there and fears them, whether it's because of their lack of defense or the fact that they're like big guy in the middle is Nikola Jokic. I don't see that being something that any of these teams would be like, you know what, this is something to be worried about. No, I do agree with that. But I think for either one of these series, whether it's against the Oklahoma City Thunder or the Minnesota Timberwolves, I just think that their offense, in terms of one, Nikola Jokic, and two, just everyone else in that roster having like career years, having like, the ability to just produce at any point. I think that's going to be something extremely key in this series, in any of these series. Now, I will say this for sure. I think the Nuggets want the Timberwolves more than the Oklahoma City Thunder right now. I do agree with that. I think that if they do go against the Minnesota Timberwolves, I think that Nikola Jokic pulls Rudy Gobert out the paint, and they're just going to absolutely dot up the Timberwolves, because once you take Rudy Gobert out the paint, he completely gets nullified on the defensive end. I think Conley's going to be key in that series in terms of being a steady hand, which they didn't have last year. By the end of the day, I just think that the Nuggets offense is too potent with Jamal Murray, with Michael Porter Jr., and it goes deep into that. And then they have a deep bag in terms of that offensive talent, which is really, really key. Now, Ken and Anthony Edwards do have offensive talent as well, but I just think that them two versus the Nuggets probably 1-7 in terms of their ability to produce on the offensive end is going to be extremely tough, and I think that's going to be a more favorable series for them. Now, the Oklahoma City series, it was very tough for them to stop players such as Jordan Poole and Steph Curry. Oh, sorry, not even Steph Curry. Jordan Poole in that first round. Jordan Poole went absolutely off in that first round. I don't think they have anyone that can handle SGA, man. I don't think anyone on that Nuggets roster can deal with SGA, and I think that's going to be absolutely massive. This Oklahoma City Thunder team, if they're able to get by these Timberwolves, they're giving me some more vibes to that Pelicans team last year, where against the Phoenix Suns they took 2 games off. They took 2 games off and literally gave them a scare. I think something similar can happen with that if they do beat the Minnesota Timberwolves. This can be a series where Shai Gilgeous-Alexander can really cement himself as like a top 10 guy in this league, playing against one of the MVP candidates in Nikola Jokic. I think the other guys are sneaky good in terms of production as well on the Oklahoma City Thunder team, and I think it's going to surprise the Denver Nuggets in general. So even though Nikola Jokic, I still think he's going to have a great series, and I think the Thunder are actually going to force him to score the ball a lot more because they're going to focus a lot on the other guys. I think it's going to be a tough series for them, and I think that's why in that series in particular, if the Nuggets do go against the Thunder, if Jamal Murray can replicate Bubble Murray's status, that's going to really be a huge difference maker here. Because again, same thing with the Timberwolves. No one's going to be able to deal with Jokic on an OKC Thunder team, especially looking at that front court depth. Ain't no way anyone's going to be able to handle Nikola Jokic. But if Jamal Murray can be that second guy, produce almost 30 points a game, like we've seen in the bubble, he's with his multiple 40-point performances. If he's able to do that against the Thunder, then it should be light work. But we don't know if that's the case yet. And I think that the Thunder see that maybe forcing Jokic to do like a lot of the scoring bulk as well could really benefit them. I think that's going to be a very honestly a more competitive series than against the Minnesota Timberwolves. So honestly, out of those two, I do think the Nuggets would win the Timberwolves in that instance. OKC, again, another team to watch out for. But Jay, final prediction of the episode. Who do you got in terms of if they face either the Thunder or the Timberwolves?
I think if the Denver Nuggets face off against the Minnesota Timberwolves, they get them out of there in 5 games. I think if the Denver Nuggets go up against the Oklahoma City Thunder, they will have to prove themselves in a Game 7 where they have home court advantage.
Oh, wow.
The last time we saw a breakout guard show up in a series against the Denver Nuggets, Donovan Mitchell willed the Utah Jazz as a team that was not nearly as 1-to-1 in terms of how they matched up against the Denver Nuggets. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the guy now. He is that dude. And I think that in terms of how they match up and their play style, they fit much better as a team to combat against a Nikola Jokic-led team. I give you the fact that I think offensively, Nikola Jokic should be able to feast on that side of the ball. The thing is that I think a up-tempo team like the Oklahoma City Thunder play a style that can also force Nikola Jokic to have to work defensively, or they will give up a lot of baskets. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you mentioned something about this in the Lakers series. Let me bring it up here. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is one of the best foul drawers in the NBA. That is going to be notable against a team that has a lot of wings that they can throw at him, but that hasn't stopped him all season long. And mind you, this is still a team that does not have a ton of spacing, and he's been able to operate like this. Now we're talking about a team that, despite the lack of spacing, is playing some of their best basketball at a perfect time where their other guys are starting to get the wheels turning. Look, man, I'm not going to take Oklahoma City because I feel like that's me getting too bold, but I feel like this is a series that definitely goes 6 to 7 games, and Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets are going to have to prove themselves because I think that the Oklahoma City Thunder are much better built for a series like this than maybe some of the other potential situations they could have ran into had they, been seeded differently.
Yeah. What about the Timberwolves series in terms of that one, if they do get that one?
T-Wolves series, man, I think that's 5 games. I hate to say it, but I think Karl Anthony Towns is just like okay, maybe this is me being completely like blunt and aggressive, but I think Karl Anthony Towns is not meant to be a big time player on a big time stage. And I think against a guy of the caliber of Nikola Jokic, he is going to get picked on. I think when you look at series where the cat has been quote unquote active participant, it hasn't been impactful basketball, bro. I think even when you
Yeah.
look back at that Memphis Grizzlies series, I didn't feel Karl Anthony Towns' presence that much, but I felt the emergence of Anthony Edwards as a player.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about what could be a potential issue with Anthony Edwards in terms of the cramping and just the overall aggression as a player so far. If he's gonna have to be aggressive in a series like that, because I think that's their only way that they are even competitive. Because I think that Karl Anthony Towns versus Nikola Jokic matchup has already written itself. Um, yeah, it's tough. I also just think they're at a weird disadvantage. If the McDaniels thing was not an issue, if the Rudy Gobert clearly being arguably Nikola Jokic's favorite center matchup in terms of guys that
Yeah.
he could go up against in terms of all-stars that he would definitely like to cook on a regular basis. If
Yeah.
those factors weren't included, maybe things are a little bit different. But the fact that Nikola Jokic eats on Rudy Gobert pretty frequently, and the fact that the perimeter defense across the board for the Timberwolves has taken a big hit with McDaniels out, I I don't see them as much of a threat.
Yeah, 100%. Again, I think the Timberwolves will have like a better like offensive like output showing compared to last year, just because having a more reliable table setter in Mike Conley is going to make a big difference. But losing out on Jaden McDaniels, man, that's going to be extremely tough for that Timberwolves team. And that's why in that series I'm going to go 5, whether it is Towns or Gobert. Jokic is just going to pick them apart. It's going to absolutely pick them apart. And I think that the multiple bodies that Anthony Edwards is going to see, whether it's KCP, whether it's Bruce Brown, whether it's Aaron Gordon, I think it's just going to kind of overwhelm him, just like seeing like just the multiple bodies just being switched on to him. Because as much as the Nuggets aren't the best defensive team, in terms of their wings, at least they're switchable. At least they're switchable without Michael Porter Jr. on the court. At least they're switchable. So I think that's going to be just something like very difficult for the Timberwolves to overcome. And I still think they're going to have a good offensive output, but at the end of the day, it's the Nuggets' offensive depth in terms of especially the top 3 and Jokic, Jamal Murray, and Michael Porter Jr. I think it's going to be too much, and it's going to overwhelm the Timberwolves. So I have the Nuggets, again, beating them in 5. I also have them beating them in 5. Instead of the OKC Thunder matchup, I'm not going to go as far as to say 7, but I do think the Oklahoma City is going to give them a series. I'm going to go in 6. I'm going to say that the Thunder do push them to 6, very similar to how the Pelicans almost took down the Suns last year. I love all the points that you made about the play style is just something that it's going to be really difficult for the Nuggets to handle. SGA being that guy who kind of just controls the pace, plays at his own speed, and no matter what, it feels like no matter who you have on him, he's still able to get to his spots and just get the bucket, which is like a true showing of a superstar in the making in terms of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You have that, and then you have Giddey, you have Dort playing good basketball at the right time. Again, it's just giving me the same vibes as the Pelicans team, man. It's just giving me the very similar vibes. And it's going to be the same thing where it's like, man, they're like a 1 or 2 pieces away from really being legit. We said that with the Pelicans last year when they're like, man, imagine if Zion was on that team. This team is going to be a championship contender. Now, I'm not going to say that's going to be the same thing about the Thunder with saying, oh, them adding Chet Holmgren is going to make them a championship contender. But maybe adding Chet Holmgren can help them take the next step. Potentially adding someone in free agency or potentially via trade, like maybe an unsettled superstar, could put this team over the edge. And I think that's going to be this series against the Nuggets is going to be a really good showing. But I do not want to take away anything from the Nuggets, even though they have lollygagged over the last couple of weeks. I mean, I'm not gonna take anything of that just because they had the first two locked up what feels like for about a month now or so. So I just think that Nikola Jokic still one of the top MVP candidates, and the potential for Jamal Murray being back to bubble Jamal Murray in like a playoff setting, which we have seen him absolutely excel in as like an X factor for this team, could really be a difference maker. So I have Nuggets winning the series either way, but I do think the Nuggets, I have them going against OKC in 6. I think it's going to be a very fun series. That it's going to be very fun. And I'm going to definitely keep my eye on, and I think it's going to surprise a lot of people saying, man, this Oklahoma City team is it's pretty legit, man. It's going to be a really fun team to watch for the next 5 to 10 years. Jay, any final thoughts on any of these two series?
Yeah, I think the last thing that I have on this series in particular is just that when I say I don't fear the Denver Nuggets, I don't want that to be misconstrued because I also know that I'm on the record for saying that I'm still picking Nikola Jokic as my MVP. But I think that when you look at them in any given series, they are definitely a team that plays a certain kind of way, and it's very geared to the effectiveness of Nikola Jokic, and it's very tailored to that to the point that they're a team that can get got because of the fact that he has so much of an offensive responsibility and the fact that on defense he is not necessarily effective, or some would question his effort level defensively because he
Yeah.
understands the kind of offensive output that he has to have in order for this team to be effective on a night-to-night basis. So in a series where you can game plan for that, like I said, I think a big thing that really stands out when you talk about a 7-game series is the ability to speed the Denver Nuggets up is something that really puts them in a bad position because the Denver Nuggets don't have the kind of defensive personnel to respond to that well, because that mainly is built off the back of having a big time rim defender, and they do not have that. So I do fear for them because I feel like they will have the best player in the series, whether it's against the Minnesota Timberwolves or the Oklahoma City Thunder. I do believe that much. But from a styles makes fights concept perspective, they go into certain series where maybe they are not nearly as favorable because of the way that they play. This is one of those where, in particular, if it's against the Oklahoma City Thunder, I don't know if the way that the OKC Thunder play is something that the Denver Nuggets really want to see, considering their past history with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is a very important stat. I think it kind of goes along with your about them speeding the game up. The Nuggets rank bottom 10 in terms of turnovers in in this past NBA season, and the Thunder are top 5 in steals. So if that is able to come through in the in this series, it could be something to definitely look out for. So be on the lookout for that. The Thunder speeding up the Nuggets, but if the Nuggets can control the pace in that series, especially through Nikola Jokic, then it's curtains. It's curtains because we know how good their offense can be, and we know how good Nikola Jokic is. So that should definitely be something to look at. But yeah, those are all our predictions for the Final Four series. Let us know down below what you guys think. The NBA playoffs start today by the time you're listening to this. So enjoy some NBA basketball. The playoffs are here, and it's going to be super, super exciting to watch going forward. Jay, we have reached the end of another Hit Your Free Throws episode, another classic in the books. Jay, any final thoughts for these beautiful people?
So as TV mentioned beforehand, by the time you guys listen to this, the NBA playoffs are officially going to be commenced. This is the time. This is the time where I think we're going to be able to see some elite basketball. Watch out for a handful of the guys that we named as some potential breakout guys, or some guys that can end up playing a heavy role in not even just being able to win a series, but maybe even potentially pull off an upset or two in there as well. Um, Look, man, I'm still rooting for my Chicago Bulls, and hopefully by the time that everybody listens to this, they are in a series against the Milwaukee Bucks. For good or for bad, is a kind of a separate conversation. Um,
Yeah,
but look, man, at the end of the day, um, postseason basketball is here. TV, it's time.
it's going to
It's
be
time.
good. Yeah, and if you want to be caught up with anything postseason basketball, you know where to find us. Hit Your Free Throws, Instagram, Twitter, um, anything on the YouTubes. You're gonna have 1 to 2 episodes a week, so be on the lookout for that. We're gonna be covering all things NBA playoff basketball. It's gonna be a super super dope time. And yeah, you can again follow all of our social all of our posts and socials down below. At Hit Your Free Throws on all of those social networks, YouTube and the podcast networks as well. You can find us there. And yeah, another great episode in the books. Thank you guys for watching and listening. Remember to show some love. Hope you all have a fantastic day. This is TV. That's Jay. We're both signing out. Peace.
Peace.